Welcome to the Nourish Together Gut, Heart, and Mind podcast. I'm Thais Harris, and today my guest is Mary Campbell, and it is such an exciting conversation about intimacy and something that, many people might not correlate to nutrition and wellness. But it has everything to do with how we inhabit our bodies and how we experience our life and pleasure and all the things that are worth living for. Right, Mary?
Exactly.
Welcome.
Exactly. Yeah, it's delightful to be here. Thanks so much, Thais. Yeah, I've been also just really enjoying diving into your work and thinking a lot about nutrition, nutrition on a grand scale. So
Mm,
definitely nutrition about what we eat and how we support ourselves with water, etc. But nutrition, like what is it that we can bring into our lives that is here and available for our nourishment, sustenance, um, joy,
mhm.
happiness. We tend as humans, because of our vestibular brain, that lizard brain that wants to keep us safe all the time, we tend as humans to focus on what the problem is. And
Mhm.
something's wrong, and we got to fix this problem. And we also feel in control if we can try to fix a problem. So it's a strategy that we as humans use. But what I find is that because we tend to be oriented that way, we tend to ignore all of the gorgeous pieces of life, all
Mhm.
of the substance, all of the experiences and the tastes and touches and scents that are here for our pleasure. And that's sort of the angle I go at things well past menopause. I'm, at that place where my body has really changed. Um, I have the wrinkles, I have all those things, but I have to say, I'm probably happier than I've ever been in my life. Although I've had wonderful, joyous times with my children and in wonderful relationships and travel and other things. But as a human in my
Mhm.
60s now, I am just quite excited about bringing and enjoying the nourishment and um, delights that the world has to offer, all for my nourishment. So I love the title of your website, Nourishing Together. We're learning, inviting people to experience more of this joy and delight that's here, that's ready and willing to nourish us.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I love that you opened with that. And so much of my work is around diet as our daily intake of
Yeah,
everything, because
exactly.
it's not just what we eat, it's how we eat it, when we eat it, who we're with, how we're consuming everything right in our day to day. If like life is a big buffet, what are we choosing to put on our plate? Be it media, relationships, products, whatever it is. And so that very much what you just said about finding nourishment and all, like, what are all the things that nourish your entire being? And so let's start right there. And I think, intimacy and deep, meaningful relationships are one of the keystones of human happiness. So what do you want to share about intimacy and coming to this work, for relationships, for couples, but I guess not necessarily just couples, right? Every relationship.
Yeah. I always say that intimacy is an inside job. If you're telling the truth to yourself, that's the primary place that we really want to speak here, because we we can hide from our own truth. We can um, really sort of be seduced by a truth from the culture, or a truth, I would say, an opinion, an advertising, something else. But we really often are not encouraged to listen to our own truth. So that's something that happens from childhood. But as we grow older, we're really beginning, especially as we move toward menopause, and through the middle part of our lives, we're really looking not at what the culture expects of us or our family or our partner, but what do we need? So that's the first place. Intimacy here. Then when you when you're really speaking the truth and communicating from a place of love, you don't have to be mean or angry, although sometimes that happens, but really coming from this place of wanting to connect. I think, as you said, it's foundational to humans to connect. We are connector beings. That's how we learn to survive, likely in our prehistory, because we work together, we banded together, we do best together with others. It's not healthy to be isolated. It's really, we need others, but we often have accumulated habits and conditioning from our childhood that doesn't support the kind of intimacy that we want. So we learn to hide, or we learn to kind of grasp for something that we can't quite get, or we learn to push away what we're afraid of. We have these strategies that are natural to humans when we're not looking more deeply. So some of the work I do is just to begin to see what's blocking the kind of intimacy you want in your life. Because the kind of intimacy you want, intimacy implies the word sex. But I would say that that's just a little bit of what intimacy is. Intimacy really has to do with the depth of capacity and the depth of beingness that you bring to another person, and how you can be all of yourself, not the imagined image that you want to portray, which is often what we do when we're younger, but how we can just be okay enough with ourselves to then bring that to another person. And often, when we really strip away all the artifice or the things we think we need to be, to drop down and be speaking truth about ourselves, we often like to turn the truth toward somebody else and tell them who they are and what they need to do. I really look at how we can speak our own truth. It's hard for me. It's the old nonviolent communication language. I'm feeling da da da, starting.
Right.
So that the kind of intimacy I'm looking for is that kind of truth telling. Often after something I've been afraid to speak because it feels so big and scary, it opens up a kind of intimacy. It really surprises me. So that's a piece. Um, Obviously, our sexual connection is one of the most delightful parts about being human.
Right.
We're one of the few species that is allowed to enjoy orgasm or enjoy sexuality for more than a few seconds. Most experiences for other mammals, at least, are quick. So
Mhm.
this is something we have a capacity for. We've developed a capacity for, and learning how to communicate your needs and your desires, and feeling free to have desires that may not be the desires you think are normal. I just encourage that knowing of oneself and then exploring with a curiosity. So that's a bit of a big umbrella.
Yeah, the big picture, which I love, and I love Esther Perel talks about intimacy as into me see,
Yeah.
which I love. It's what you talked about, like being just your truth self, like being able to really be seen as who you are in your essence without all the things we put on.
Mhm.
And then this notion of curiosity and um, I don't know if abandon is the right word. I don't know if it's the word that's coming to mind, but I feel like especially in like looking at intimacy from like the sexual side of it, there's something about being able to um what's the word? It's not abandon. It's not release. I'm getting closer though.
Ah, we'll
What's
keep
the word?
trying.
It starts with R. Anyway, I'll think of it.
Release.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
this notion of just really being able to be who we are without
Yeah.
any kind of external judging mind.
Yeah.
What do you find stays in the way or tends to block intimacy,
Yeah.
especially, with the audience that you work with? What have you seen most commonly?
Yeah. There's lots of shoulds. They think most people think they should be sexual in a certain way. That
Mm,
there's a normal there's something they need to accommodate to. Um, that's one of the biggest ones. For many women, we don't know what really pleases us. We've learned about our sexuality in being coupled with other people, usually men. Um, if you're in a cis relationship, just the orienting towards what a man likes is often vastly different from what a woman is satisfied by. I hate to categorize like this in gender, so I'm going to sort of speak in generalities. But what we know is that a woman is affected by her surroundings, by what happened during the day, by her emotional experience, by the temperature of the room, by the way she feels in her body, by the attitudes she has about herself. All of these things play into her turn on. You know,
Mhm.
I often say foreplay is all day. It's really that experience. What happens in the morning when your partner or you leave? How do you connect? How do you connect during the day? Are you bringing some energy of attention to the other one? Are you just like focusing on your own thing and then thinking you're going to come home and have connection, which often doesn't happen that way. So, so beginning to orient that experience of warming up.
Mhm.
Most women need to warm up. Once in a while, you can have a quickie, and it's fun. That works better when you're younger, I have to say. Um, but what I also notice is that men are the male being is more focused on the genitals because that's his orientation. He's had that penis in his hand since he was born. He's very associated with that part of his body. So he is easily turned on. It happens fast, usually happens quick. He gets hard, and he knows what he wants. He knows his body very well. But for many, many women, we don't learn about our bodies early for what pleases us. So
Mhm.
I think that's one of the core experiences, especially if you haven't been with a lot of partners. Another thing I notice is that there can be faking. There can be sort of like, oh, I really want to have an orgasm. I really want to make it feel good. Um, and getting past that to just say, "Mm, this is how I am." Also, I think one of the challenges is learning how to speak truth. You
Mhm.
know, sometimes we get so frustrated, we don't speak truth very kindly, very carefully, and the truth comes out in a way that does hurt.
Mhm.
And when we haven't been able to communicate for a while, there's frustration that comes, and it just ends up not in a good situation. So I really train couples that I work with to learn how to language communicating. Lots of people don't communicate at all during sex,
Mhm.
during lovemaking. They just don't. They just hope it goes well. And I was just speaking with a woman, a client, and her partner. We were working together the other day, and she said, "Yeah, usually like he might move on to something else, and I want him to stay where he was, but I don't want to say that because I don't want to make him feel like he didn't really do it right. So I don't say anything, and then I get a little bored, and then I tune out, and that's the end." One more thing, I'm realizing they're just coming to me like this. One more thing is that we are so in our minds when
Mhm.
the sexual experience is a body experience influenced by what we think. So if we are distracted by even the temperature in the room, the lighting, a sound someplace else, our minds go right there because we're associated with safety. We want to be in a safe situation.
Mhm.
And we will tend to not be in our feeling body. And I notice when my mind goes there, what I try to do as much as I can, it's like a meditation practice, is come back to my breath and come back to my body. Notice what I'm
Mhm.
sensing. Notice what I'm feeling. Notice what pleases my hands in lovemaking, what pleases my body. Associate back with those experiences. Associate back with how you like to touch your partner, how
Mhm.
that makes you feel, and then the touch you like and letting yourself really feel it and not just feel it and then go on to the next thing fast
Right.
to really soak it in.
Yeah, so it sounds like what I'm hearing as far as like the things that can really stand in the way of true intimacy, and we're now focusing a little more on the actual, sexual part
Right.
of intimacy, are being in our heads, not being able to speak our truth, right? Or at least not knowing how to language around that, and then not knowing what we like, not knowing even how to, like if we don't know that our truth, like how can we even communicate it? And that can create a lot of frustration that people don't know what to do with, because
Yeah.
you don't know what to express because you don't know what you're expressing in the first place.
In-
And I feel like it's those three things I think stay in the way of intimacy overall. Like just even if it's intimacy with a friend, right? It's like
It's true.
all those things kind of echo into other types of intimacy as well.
There's also this sense of shame where we
Mm,
think we're not doing it right, or we
hmm.
think we don't know how, or we have this self-doubt and often self-recrimination. Nothing is a worse thing for turn on than that.
Yeah.
As soon as you have a negative feeling about yourself or your partner, you may as well give up. Unless you can turn the tides, it's like a huge yacht. You have to turn that tide so that you
Yes.
reorient towards what's working instead of what's not working.
Well, shame, let's park there for a minute because
Yeah.
that's a big one. And it's huge in my work. When people are dealing with shame, even when they're working with a nutritionist, for example, and they come like, oh, I was bad and I did this and I
Right.
did that and shame on me. Like it's real, like we work on that actually to reverse some of that feeling and thinking. And it's a thinking that then causes the feeling and then causes a whole cascade of um, chemicals in the body and the whole biological response to shame, which can work against somebody's goals and create more inflammation and all that. But in the context of intimacy, it will work against intimacy because usually if there's shame, the next step is to shut down, right? And I think if you're shutting down, then you can't have intimacy.
And you're not feeling. As soon as shame comes in, you're in your head,
Hmm.
causing the reactions in your body, and you can't take in pleasant sensations.
Hmm.
If you're in shame, you can't have joy at the same time.
Right. And even as far as the biological consequence of getting dry, right? Like
Yeah,
everything changes, everything shuts down quite literally, not just in the head, but the whole body then goes into a
that's
different direction that isn't open to pleasure and to
so true.
connection.
The other thing I
Hmm.
wanted to say is that we tend to have an identity that we like to have about ourselves. I'm a woman who likes sex. I'm a woman, and we can have these identities about ourselves that then when our bodies don't always respond in the way we wish, depending
Hmm.
on whatever happened, or we're a little sick or something, we can then be caught between our identity and reality. And
Yeah.
we don't like to give up our identity, but you know, yep, this is just, I had an experience this morning where I just had to say, you know, yeah, let's just cuddle. you know,
So
it's,
this is a great segue, actually. Sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
like,
no,
what do
please.
you do in those moments when you still want to have intimacy, but it's not about sexual intimacy?
Yeah, I think a lot depends on how you've been holding your intimacy beforehand. If you have a good connected relationship, you communicate well, then if something doesn't feel right, or maybe just something hurts, if something doesn't feel right, or you just are not getting turned on, some days that happens, to just to not make it anybody else's fault. I think
Mhm.
that's really critical. Some days just there's something in the air. So I like to just take away all the faults. If you've been in good connection prior to that, you're not into a fighting routine, or you're not in frustration with one another, or you've cleaned that up. If you're in good communication, you can just say, God, baby, I really want to be close. Just this doesn't feel good today. Can we just cuddle? And or can I Can I give you some pleasure? What would you like right now? Or if you're not feeling up, to just say, God, I just don't feel well. I
Mhm.
love you. I want to be connected. I like to use the sandwich method to
Mm.
say, I really love you. I'm not feeling so well right now, but God, I love it when we can be connected. Some short way of having the pieces of bread on either end being the good, what we like to think of as connected, and the one in the
Mhm.
middle is about us and what's not working or working,
Right.
what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I feel like as we evolve this conversation, because I want to get into hormones and all of that, but I'm liking this piece around the sandwich, the nonviolent communication items. So much of intimacy has to do with communication. I think you've made that point now very clearly, and isn't everything, right? Like all relationships, be them sort of transactional or work, it's all about communication. How do you help people find ways that they can communicate really from, you know, their heart versus staying in their mind? And actually, Mary, this is a great point actually to ask you, how did you come into this work? Like what are the influences or the sort of teachers, that have led you into this intimacy relationship work? Because I know you're also a spiritual counselor. So what informs
Yeah,
your
it's
work?
it's been a big and wonderful exploration. I had sexual abuse when I was 4. Of course, I didn't remember that. I was 45 when I did some EMDR and hypnosis and remembered pieces enough
Mm,
to make sense out of what had been my experience
mhm,
in my life up until then. And I pretty quickly just started to open to the understanding of how disconnected I'd become from my body to protect myself. I was a good lover,
mhm,
do the right things, but I wasn't connected to myself. So my orgasms were not very frequent, or I wasn't very much in touch with my body. I knew how to please other people, but not myself. So um, I did a vision quest when I was 45, a Native American vision quest, and my I had 3 kids at that point. I was not very interested in sex at all. um, I was I was depressed. Honestly, um, I in that experience in the Vision Quest in a sweat lodge, I think I had a Kundalini awakening or something happened in my energy field, and the heat and the practices and just the ritual activated something in me, and I just spent the rest of the evening vibrating in my body in a way that I didn't know. Um, and then we were about to be assigned to go out to have a 4-day fast and a 3-day solo. Yes, I think that was the thing, by ourselves completely. And
mhm,
um, I I was assigned to make love to everything, to make love to the trees and the mud and the water. This was Utah. It was amazing. It was September, to the sky, to the stars at night. It opened me into a realm that I didn't understand.
mm,
There were 2 tall pine trees of some sort, and their roots were together, and they went up like this. And I had the vision of that was what I wanted intimacy to be like with a partner, where we're so grounded together, so
mhm,
intertwined in the roots of our nourishment for one another, in our support, that then we can fly free in the world and bring our wisdom and our uh, vitality and our calling to the world. So I came back not knowing what all this meant for me.
mhm,
I knew I wanted to help women say yes and say no because we can't do that very well.
mhm,
And I could not do either very well. So I spent a few years exploring and trying to understand what happened with me. My husband and I started to do tantra weekends and 10 days, and really just we're diving into who are we as sexual beings? Who are we as intimate beings? how can we nourish that? Um, it was that relationship lasted 7 more years. I was married 25 years. It was really a beautiful relationship. For other reasons, it needed to end, and that was 14 years ago.
Mhm.
But the the learning that started then, I then explored. I really went used Caroline Muir was one of my first teachers. Joan Hartfield, Thomas
Mhm.
Hartfield. I worked with a number of other Tantra teachers, and I became quite interested at that point. I went to seminary as an interfaith, interspiritual seminary. I began coaching and working with people around how is it that we can be the light that we are and drop the things that stand in the way. And that applies personally as well as in an intimate relationship. So I think those are the core. Now I work with I'm assisting to Miranda McPherson, who's a non-dual teacher, just beautiful, beautiful, feminine, helping us to drop the ego, helping to relax the ego and just enjoy life. So, and I'm a
Mhm.
dancer and I'm dancing and I'm living the delight of life through something called Biodanza. So it's just been actually quite an exciting life becoming embodied after a time of shame around my body and sexuality, just
Mhm.
blooming. I feel like I am healing 7 generations back of my very Calvinist upbringing and heritage,
Nice.
and moving into a time of just just hopefully more freedom for everybody to be themselves, to love themselves, to enjoy partnering, to enjoy the beauty of the earth and them and our personal ways of connecting.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. That is quite the journey. And so hearing you talk about your influences and dance, which I love because I feel like there's a part there about being embodied that also feeds into
Oh,
intimacy and just remembering we are body beings, like you said before, not just being in our heads, because that can be the turnoff.
mhm.
Um, but there's something about, the non-duality, moving your body, and then tantra, that somehow you merge those three things into this work, right? So what would you say as far as we talked about, what blocks intimacy? How can you then increase intimacy, both with yourself, the inside job that you started talking about, and then with others?
Yeah. You know, it's, I want to just segue back for a minute. Another thing that blocks intimacy is rushing. We
Mm,
are such a rushing culture. And
yeah.
I am so at fault myself. I get excited and I go and which is fine, but I can get myself into that rushing mode. It's really hard to drop down when you're in that space. So
Mhm.
what I would say is this nourishment that I'm looking toward, I've just did it for a while and then let go of it, and I'm coming back to making sure that I'm always sitting down when I eat.
Mhm.
You know, it's just so easy to eat on the run and grab something and go, and occasionally that has to happen. But it takes a discipline actually to go slowly, a
Yeah.
discipline to thank the broccoli on my plate and the chicken and whatever else is there. Just thank the lives that have been given for my life. I think thanks is a really big piece. So in the
Mhm.
same way, when we're connecting with a partner, to 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 really be fluid in our sharing of what we appreciate, what we love, what we, I'm I'm a big proponent of the love languages, those 5 love languages from whenever ago, years
Mhm.
ago, because most of us have one that's really primary, and we give that one because that's our natural language. Um, and mine is words of affirmation. But they have to come. It has to be truth. I know
Right.
it's not truth, but to hear somebody say, "I love the way you da 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 da," everybody feels seen. I think that's
Yeah.
one of the things that we really want in an intimate relationship is to be seen, especially by our partners. We want to be seen for what we value in ourselves. So having that relationship, that kind of communication. I often say it's not very sexy, but it's really helpful to create time, to
Mm,
time on the calendar. You know, when you have a busy life, this is not easy. If I don't put things on my calendar, if I don't put my walk on the calendar, I'm not going to get it. You know,
yeah.
I have to put it in like that. I have a relationship with my partner now where he comes to my house. We don't live together. He comes to my house Tuesday nights, and we have Wednesday morning together. I never schedule anything. So that's a discipline. I don't happen to have my children living with me anymore, so that's easier. But
Hmm.
I just really encourage people to, you know, we prioritize our work by making appointments. We tend to think that our connection should just come spontaneously and we should just be turned on without any. And once in a while
Right.
it happens, you know, maybe watch a good movie. um,
Yeah.
but I think it really has to be cultivated and given priority. And you can do that. You can offer spontaneity to happen, but by doing by setting time. I think that's one of the things. I've just touched on a
Mm,
few possible things here, Thais, but those it's really not from a should, but
hmm.
from a want. I really want. It's a desire. You know, if we are in touch with our desires, if we really let them flow through us, we can feel it. And you asked earlier about our heart, you know,
Mm,
connecting to the heart's desire. You know, my heart's desire is to be in union with another person, to
right.
really adore and relish that being and to relish the way we interplay, the dance we have together, whether we're sitting in front of the fire or whether we're in bed.
Right. And I think you really touched upon intention and also anticipation, which I think is one of the pillars that the Gottman's work,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, talks a lot about, like having something to look forward to together. And I think when you set intention with like the calendar, it doesn't need to be like, oh, it's so mechanic, right? And it's not just spontaneous if it's like every Wednesday or whatever. It's like, no, it's actually that setting intention to be together. And I think the assumption that, well, we're already home every night together, it's like, especially when you have kids, and I have
Yes.
little kids,
Yeah.
everything gets in the way, you know, like there's just a lot that needs attention. Whether it's the kids, the dishes, the whatever, you know,
There's always
multitude of
something.
things, the bills, the
Yeah.
but if you make the intention for that time, then it's not about a mechanical, like forced thing, but instead a safeguarding
That's a
of
beautiful
space to
word.
be with each other.
That's great. You're safeguarding something that's precious. You know, it is sacred. That the relationship that we have with our partners or our lovers or people in our lives, anybody actually,
Hmm.
the relationship with my daughter lives in LA. We talk on Fridays. I know she doesn't work. It's sacred to me to set that time aside because I miss her. And she's so dear to me. So
Yeah.
in that way, we by prioritizing, we bring the sacred in, we bring the spiritual aspect of what we most how we most want our lives to be.
Mm,
And that's intention. That's really
yeah.
I'm not a big 5-year plan person. I'm more oh, I want to be right now. Um,
Hmm.
Danielle Laporte in her work, How Do You Want to Feel?
Hmm.
Knowing how you want to feel and then setting things up so you feel that way. That's intention.
Right. Yeah, beautiful. So, um, let's talk just a little bit about what changes. So we talked about things that block intimacy, things that are going to contribute to intimacy, including intention um, and sort of the sacredness of the time and holding the space. What happens for women? I mean, and I'm bringing this up. We've been presenting together at these
Yeah.
beautiful workshops that are creating community for women that are in perimenopause and menopause. And there's something that changes, right? So both from the aspect of around the personality or even the understanding of who we are and being able to sort of speak more truth to that, be more in our truth.
Mhm.
But sometimes there's a biological um, sort of consequence from the changes in hormones
Mhm.
that can actually interfere with our ability to show up for a partner, to show up in an intimate relationship. What can you share about that and sort of how to look at that and how to sort of work with it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, if we're lucky and we live long enough, all of us will be in menopause. You know, I think of it as the best time. Like it's your reward for all the work and the energy and all you've brought to your life. You get this blossoming time. The culture sees that as negative, that you're no longer, if you're no longer fertile, like you may as well just forget about you because you're not valuable anymore. I think there's some change now as we're really honoring women as we grow older, but as our hormones change, so does our desire. So estrogen is just such a, they call it a connector. It's this friend and there's a few words about that, but it's just tend and befriend. So we just
Hmm.
know how to make connection happen all the time, often to our own detriment. But
Hmm.
we do that as we have children. You're caring, you're tending, you're doing that always. It's priority. When you go through perimenopause, all those hormones are changing and shifting. They drop, estrogen drops way down, testosterone drops, just progesterone helps you sleep. Um, all of these have pretty intense needs for the body. I As we've been learning, we have these estrogen receptors all through our bodies and our bones and our brain and our heart and our muscles and
Hmm.
our blood vessels. Without it, we're different,
Yeah.
and it tends to be that we kind of sex is just not quite as interesting anymore. Our tissues can become much more dry. Um,
Hmm.
we can we, in prioritizing ourselves, we can get kind of snippy and nasty, like frustrated. There's just
Hmm.
a lot of energy that's happening at that time. If you're not caring for yourself really well, it can be a very hard time. So I've been pretty fortunate. I didn't have a lot of hot sweats and night sweats and hot flashes. I had anxiety. I was just incredibly anxious, and I didn't know what that was coming from. It really
Hmm.
nerved me in ways. Um,
Yeah. My clients report that a lot
oh
too.
God,
Like,
it's
yeah.
really. I think estrogen is like this best, yummy chemical that relaxes us and keeps us just. You can just drop in, and without
Hmm.
it, I understand now. While in the 50s, they gave women Valium, and having cocktails at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock was what you did because you just needed to find a way to chill out.
Hmm.
So what I watch is that during menopause, understanding that it's coming,
Hmm.
being proactive to look for acupuncture, herbs, hormones, HRT, hormone replacement therapy if you want. And really lifestyle changes,
Hmm.
really looking at what is important. What
Right.
can I drop off my list of things I have to do? How can
Hmm.
I really tune into the what's most valuable and care for my sleep? It's just when sleep starts to be hard to get when you need more of it.
Yeah.
So all these ways to sort of work with that. But what I have to say is that as we go through this time, we do prioritize our needs more. It's when we stop putting up with sex that doesn't work for us anymore, jobs that don't work for us anymore, people that don't work for us anymore. We really start to attune better to ourselves. So
Hmm.
I think it's a sacred time. It's hard because
Hmm.
that is not socially acceptable. There are many, many women. It's called gray divorce. It happens in the 50s where women just have had it. I'm out of here.
Hmm.
So for that not to happen, there needs to be really clear communication early on
Yeah.
and probably just assists to help you through that period so that you can be more vibrant because the other side is so good. It is
Right.
so good. Um, but nourishing, again, and we're going to come back to nourishment again, Thais.
Yeah.
It's your language and it's my language too. How can you nourish yourself? How can you find what's right?
Hmm.
because some stuff will feel not right and
Yeah.
they're loud. It's loud in your face. So, how can you find all the things that are right in your partner, in your relationship, in your life, in your family, in your food, in nature, it's raining right now. I love the sound of the rain on the rooftop that's right here. I'm gonna have to go out in a minute and drive for an hour and 15 minutes in the rain. It's not what I love to do, but if I can even orient towards the pleasure of hearing that sound and just just rain is when we had a drought this fall, it was really we had the
Mm,
fires, you know,
yeah.
it's I can orient towards what's positive and what I really love. And I think that might be the most important thing to get
Mm,
through that shift is to really learn to give put your vestibular brain on the back seat, use your prefrontal cortex, choose how you want to see life, and then begin to practice that. It takes practice. It doesn't come
mhm.
very naturally because we're used to seeing what's wrong.
Yeah. Bravo. I mean, that is so key because orienting ourselves toward the positive side. I love that you said that. And so much of the work that I do is even considering like, what are your thoughts about yourself? Because
Yes,
that
of course.
that can make or break that metamorphosis. I mean, that time when we're in the cocoon and we are going to get to the butterfly stage, but it's really uncomfortable when we're going from one shape to another, right? And so this notion of the perimenopause, early menopause being such a difficult time, if we can orient ourselves toward the transformation that is possible, and the word was surrender. It wasn't
That's
when
it.
I couldn't
Yeah.
think of abandon, it was surrender.
Yeah.
That if we can surrender both to ourselves and what's happening in our lives, not in like a helpless way, but in a way that is about really accepting reality with presence and with curiosity and with love, then
Yeah.
people can get to where you are now in your 60s and so full of life and light and joy.
It's about dropping the forcing. We,
Mhm.
if you went through college, university, career, there's a lot of forcing yourself into what's expected. And we are freed during perimenopause and menopause to drop that forcing. I don't want to be anybody except who I am. And I'm the one that forces. Nobody else forces me. It's just
Mhm.
me. So recognizing the ways that I block what's really positive, the ways that I block just from my own habits, no shame, just what I've learned that worked in my life and how to let go of that forcing and rushing and really relish the life that we have. It will be short. We're going to be gone. You know, I'm getting closer to that edge. I can feel it, but it makes me even more relish what's beautiful, relish what I love,
Mhm.
relish the moments and the preciousness of my baby granddaughter on FaceTime with my son, just moments that are just my grapefruit this morning, just
Yeah,
things that bring us joy.
nourishment. Beautiful. Well, we could talk for
We
hours.
surely
I
could. I
know
hope
you
you
have to
do.
leave, so
Yeah.
more and more to come. But thank you so much
Mm,
for sharing your expertise and your heart with us.
thank you.
And I hope you have a good trip tonight.
Thank you so much. And I just so love what you bring, Thais. Thank you for asking me to be here. And thank you for bringing this nourishing self love, adoring ourselves into a practice that we can
Thank you.
relax into. So thank
Thank you so much.
you. Okay. See you later. Have a good
Bye.
meal. Bye bye.